The kingdom was covered in a quiet sadness. The streets, usually full of laughter and chatter, were empty. Gray clouds hung low in the sky, and a soft drizzle fell over the city. Today the people were not celebrating, they were mourning. Queen Amelia, the beloved ruler of the land, had passed away peacefully in her palace. She had been a queen who cared deeply for her people, who listened to their problems, and who smiled at even the smallest joys. Her death left a hole in the hearts of everyone, from the smallest child to the oldest elder. People lined the streets, holding candles, flowers, and photographs of the queen. They whispered stories of her kindness, her fairness, and her laughter. Some wiped tears from their eyes, while others stood silently lost in memories. In the center of all this sadness, the grand palace stood tall, its windows reflecting the gray sky. Flags were lowered to half-mast, and a hush fell over the city. At the palace gates, Royal Guard Captain Liam stood at attention. He was a man in his early 40s, with neatly combed hair and eyes that had seen many years of service. He had been part of the Queen's personal guard for 15 years, and he had never once broken protocol or faltered in his duty. Today was no different, or so it seemed. Every movement was precise, every step measured, and every glance directed toward the casket that carried the Queen. But inside, Liam's heart felt heavy. Queen Amelia had been more than a ruler to him. She had been like a mother, a friend, and a guiding light. The funeral procession began slowly. Horses with black plumes carried the Queen's casket, covered in delicate white flowers. Soldiers marched in perfect formation, their boots striking the ground in a rhythm that echoed through the streets. The citizens watched in silence, bowing their heads in respect. The air was filled with the soft sound of drums, played in a steady, somber beat. Liam followed the procession, his eyes fixed on the casket. Every step felt heavier than the last. As the procession moved through the streets, Liam could see people of all ages. Children held their parents' hands tightly, some too young to understand why the city was so sad. Elderly citizens leaned on canes, tears streaming down their faces as they remembered the Queen's words and deeds. Merchants paused their work, and teachers gathered students to watch quietly. Everyone wanted to honor Queen Amelia in their own way. Liam's thoughts drifted to the personal moments he had shared with the Queen. He remembered the first day he joined her guard. She had smiled at him and welcomed him warmly, asking him about his family. She had noticed small things that others did not, like a broken fence in the palace garden or a faded painting in the hall. She had praised his care for the palace and encouraged him to always do his best. Those small gestures had meant a lot to Liam. They had shown him that the Queen saw people for who they were, not just as servants or subjects. As the casket moved closer to the palace gates, Liam felt a mix of duty and sorrow. Tradition demanded that guards remain perfectly composed, showing no sign of personal emotion. Yet Liam found it impossible to hide his grief. The Queen had shaped his life in ways he could never fully explain. Her laughter, her guidance, and her warmth had left a permanent mark on him. The palace gates opened, and the casket was carried into the grand hall. Liam followed in precise steps, but inside, he felt as though he were walking in slow motion. The hall was filled with family, ministers, and diplomats from across the kingdom. Every corner of the room echoed with quiet murmurs of respect. Flowers lined the walls, and a soft light filled the room, making everything look gentle and peaceful. Yet Liam's heart felt heavy with a longing he could not contain. He stood at his post, hands straight at his sides, eyes forward, yet his mind wandered. He remembered Queen Amelia laughing at a simple joke, thanking him for helping her with a garden project, and encouraging him to always be brave and kind. She had been a leader, but also a friend, and now she was gone. The Queen's last journey had begun, and the kingdom watched in silence. Liam knew that this moment would remain in his heart forever. He did not just mourn the Queen as a ruler. He mourned the woman who had changed his life, who had seen his heart, and who had trusted him without question. The day after the Queen's passing, the palace was quieter than ever. The halls, usually filled with soft music and laughter, were now empty except for the footsteps of the royal guards. Liam walked through the corridors slowly, remembering moments that now felt precious. Every corner reminded him of Queen Amelia, her favorite painting in the East Hall, the small garden where she loved to sit in the morning sun, and the library where she would often read to the children of the palace. Liam had served the royal family for many years, but his bond with Queen Amelia was different from any other. He had protected her through storms, festivals, and countless ceremonies, yet the moments that mattered most were quiet and personal. She had noticed the tiniest details, how a young boy tripped on the palace steps, how a bird built its nest in the garden, how Liam sometimes looked tired after long hours of duty. She had always taken the time to speak kindly, to listen, and to remind him that his service mattered not because of duty alone but because of care and respect. Today, as Liam stood in the empty hall, he remembered the Queen's laughter. It was soft but full of life, the kind of laughter that could brighten a gloomy day. She had laughed at his clumsy attempts to carry too many bouquets for a ceremony, and she had gently corrected him when he grew anxious over minor mistakes. She had trusted him with her secrets, her worries, and her small joys. Those memories now felt like treasures Liam could hold on to even in her absence. Outside the palace, the citizens continued to mourn. Flowers and letters filled the streets near the palace gates. Children drew pictures of the Queen and handed them to the guards with shy smiles. People of all ages visited, offering their respects and recalling stories of her kindness. Many shared how she had changed their lives, how she had built schools, helped farmers during a bad season, and encouraged local artists to follow their dreams. Liam listened quietly to these stories when he went outside for brief walks, feeling proud to have served someone who had truly made a difference. Yet even as he listened, Liam's heart felt heavy. It was not just the weight of grief, but the realization that such moments of kindness were rare. The Queen had been extraordinary, and the kingdom had lost a guiding light. He thought of the children she had hugged, the families she had helped, and the people who had felt her warmth from afar. Her influence had touched every corner of the kingdom, yet the most personal impact had been on those who had known her closely, like Liam. As the days passed, the palace prepared for the Queen's funeral. Plans were made with perfect precision as tradition demanded. Every step was mapped, every bow rehearsed, and every flower placed with care. The citizens would witness a ceremony of honor, a display of respect and formality. But Liam knew that no ceremony could fully capture the love people felt for Queen Amelia. He remembered the small moments of joy and trust, and he realized that those moments mattered more than any protocol. One evening, Liam stood in the Queen's favorite garden, the scent of blooming flowers filling the air. He traced his fingers along the stone benches she had once touched, and looked at the sky as the sun set in brilliant colors. Here he felt her presence the most. He remembered how she had often encouraged him to look at beauty even during difficult times, to find hope in small things, and to act with kindness even when no one was watching. Liam promised himself that he would honor her memory not only by standing at attention, but by carrying forward her values in his life. As night fell, the palace was calm and still. Liam returned to his room, his mind filled with memories, his heart full of gratitude and sorrow. The Queen's life had been a gift to everyone, but her personal touch had been a treasure for those who had known her closely. Liam knew that the coming days would be filled with ceremonies, speeches, and public mourning. But he also knew that the quiet memories, the laughter, the smiles, the small gestures of trust, were what would truly keep Queen Amelia alive in the hearts of people. And as he lay down to rest, Liam whispered a promise to himself. He would honor the Queen not only with duty but with love, with courage, and with the same gentle kindness she had shown him. He knew that the bond he shared with her would guide him, even when the world felt gray and sorrowful. In that moment, amidst grief and reflection, Liam understood something powerful. Love and respect were not measured by ceremonies alone. They were felt, lived, and remembered in every thoughtful action and every quiet memory. The day of the Queen's funeral arrived. The kingdom was bathed in a soft gray light, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh flowers through the streets. Citizens lined every road leading to the palace, holding candles, flowers, and pictures of Queen Amelia. Even the youngest children understood that today was not for play, but for respect and remembrance. Their small hands clutched their parents' fingers tightly, and many whispered prayers for the Queen they had never truly met, yet loved through stories and the kindness she had spread. Inside the grand hall, preparations were complete. Velvet drapes gilded with gold hung along the walls. The royal casket rested in the center, covered with white roses, lilies, and the Queen's favorite orchids. Soft sunlight poured through the tall windows, illuminating the room in a warm, gentle glow. Ministers, ambassadors, and members of the royal family gathered quietly, their faces reflecting both grief and respect. The air was heavy with emotion, yet formal protocol demanded perfect composure. Every step, every gesture, every bow was carefully measured. Liam stood among the royal guards, his posture perfect, his face calm. Yet inside he felt a storm of emotions. He remembered the Queen's soft voice, her gentle smile, and the way she had always encouraged him to do his best. Now the memories pressed against his heart like a tide, threatening to break the careful mask of composure he wore. He had been trained for such occasions, taught to show no personal emotion, but the thought of losing someone so dear made it impossible to remain completely still. As the ceremony began, a hush fell over the room. A pianist played a slow, solemn tune, and the voices of the choir rose in quiet harmony. Liam's eyes followed the casket as it was slowly carried down the aisle. The guards moved in perfect synchronization, and every motion seemed almost like a dance, careful, deliberate, and precise. But Liam's gaze was not on the precision of the ceremony. It was on the casket itself, on the woman who had touched his life in ways words could not describe. Around him, people whispered memories of the Queen. Ministers spoke softly of her fairness, her intelligence, and her dedication. Friends shared how she had brightened their darkest days with her words. Even strangers in the hall felt connected to her through stories of generosity and courage. Liam listened quietly, feeling both pride and sadness. Pride that he had served someone so extraordinary, and sadness that her voice, her presence, would never fill the halls again. Then came a moment that struck Liam deeply. A young child, barely 6 years old, stepped forward with a small bouquet of flowers. The child's hands trembled slightly, and a guardian whispered encouragement. The child placed the flowers near the casket and bowed. Liam remembered the children Queen Amelia had often invited to the palace to hear stories, to plant flowers in the garden, and to play safely in the courtyards. This small gesture brought a lump to his throat. It was a reminder that the Queen's love had reached even the youngest hearts. Liam's thoughts drifted further. He recalled the quiet moments he had shared with the Queen, fixing the garden together, reading reports in the study, or simply walking through the palace grounds while she smiled and asked about his life. Those memories were private treasures, invisible to the public, yet they shaped every decision he had made as a guard. He realized that while the world mourned her as a queen, he mourned her as a friend, as someone who had believed in him when no one else noticed. The ceremony continued with a series of formal bows and respectful gestures. Ministers spoke their final words, and the choir sang melodies that echoed through the hall. Liam's heart swelled with both grief and admiration. He understood that the ceremony, with all its rules and traditions, could honor her position as queen, but it could not capture the depth of love she had inspired in those who knew her. For Liam, the real tribute was in the small, meaningful moments she had created throughout her life, moments that had touched him personally and profoundly. As the casket was slowly lifted and carried toward the exit of the hall, Liam's eyes followed every movement. Each step felt heavier than the last. He realized that the ceremony was not only a farewell for the Queen, but also a test of human emotion within the walls of tradition. How could a guard remain merely formal when the heart demanded expression? Liam knew that the answer would soon reveal itself, in ways no protocol could anticipate. The funeral procession moved slowly through the streets, its pace measured and deliberate. The citizens watched in silence, holding flowers, candles, and photographs of Queen Amelia. The streets, usually filled with laughter and the chatter of children, now echoed with quiet footsteps and soft whispers of sorrow. Liam walked alongside the casket, his face calm and composed, though inside his heart felt heavy with emotion. Each step reminded him of all the moments he had shared with the Queen, moments that now seemed like distant treasures he could barely reach. As the procession continued, Liam noticed a small girl near the edge of the crowd. She was holding a bouquet of white flowers, her tiny hands trembling as she tried to keep them steady. The girl's eyes were wide, filled with curiosity and sorrow, and she seemed unsure how to behave in the presence of so much formality. Liam's heart softened. He remembered the times Queen Amelia had welcomed children into the palace gardens, her voice gentle and her eyes warm. She had always said that children saw the world with truth and innocence, and their emotions were pure and unguarded. Suddenly, the girl tripped on a loose cobblestone, and the bouquet tumbled from her hands, scattering petals across the street. Liam's training told him to remain still, to maintain perfect posture, and to avoid any action that might break protocol. But in that instant, his heart overrode his training. Without thinking, he bent down and picked up the flowers, holding them carefully in his hands. The girl looked up at him with wide, grateful eyes, and a faint smile appeared on her tear-streaked face. Whispers spread quickly through the crowd. People had never seen a royal guard act in such a personal, unguarded way during a funeral. The strict rules demanded distance, but Liam had chosen compassion over protocol. Heads turned, and for a moment the rigid formality of the procession seemed softer, more human. Some people nodded silently, understanding the simple act of kindness and respect. The child's small smile carried a message far greater than words. Grief could be gentle, and even in sorrow there was room for humanity. As Liam straightened and held the bouquet, he thought of all the times the Queen had encouraged him to act with his heart. She had always said that true respect was not just in following rules, but in showing care for others. Today her words echoed in his mind. Every petal of those fallen flowers reminded him of the countless small gestures the Queen had made to make people feel seen and loved. Liam realized that while protocol was important, sometimes love and empathy mattered even more. The young girl ran to her mother, clutching the bouquet once again, and whispered, "Thank you." Liam nodded silently, feeling a warmth that contrasted with the gray skies above. He glanced at the casket again, and for the first time, the procession did not feel like a rigid ceremony. It felt alive, filled with the memories and emotions of people who had loved the Queen. Liam understood that showing humanity was not a weakness, it was a tribute. The citizens around them began to share quiet smiles and nods of approval. Some held hands with neighbors, feeling united in the shared experience of grief. Even strangers who had never met the Queen felt connected through Liam's simple gesture. It was a reminder that one act of kindness could move hearts and remind people of the humanity behind even the most formal traditions. For Liam, the moment was transformative. He had spent years following strict rules, performing duties with precision and discipline. But now he realized that the heart could not always be contained. The Queen had inspired him to act with empathy, to honor people with sincerity, and to never let protocol overshadow compassion. His small action, unseen by the Queen herself but guided by her memory, had stirred the crowd and reminded them that love and respect were deeper than ceremony. As the procession continued toward the palace gates, Liam held his head high, his heart full of emotion and resolve. He knew that the coming moments would test him further. Protocol demanded strictness, but his heart demanded honesty, and for the first time he was ready to follow the guidance of his heart no matter the consequences. The nation watched silently, the air thick with emotion, unaware that they were witnessing a guard who had already begun to honor the Queen in a way no one would forget. The funeral ceremony reached its most solemn moment. The casket of Queen Amelia was slowly carried through the palace hall, surrounded by guards and the royal family. Every movement was measured, every step choreographed according to tradition. The ministers spoke quietly, offering words of respect and remembrance. Guests bowed their heads, some whispering silent prayers. Yet amidst this perfect formality, Liam's heart felt restless. His mind replayed every memory he had of the Queen, the laughter, the quiet conversations, the trust she had placed in him. Today those memories pressed upon him more strongly than any rules could contain. Liam's hands were perfectly still at his sides, and his face showed the calm of a trained royal guard. But inside, emotions swirled like a storm. He remembered the small gestures that had meant the most. The Queen noticing a missing flower in the garden, praising him for fixing a broken bench, or thanking him for simply listening when she wanted to share a thought. Those moments were not for ceremony, yet they had shaped his life. Today they called to him more loudly than ever. As the casket was lowered closer to the final resting place, Liam felt a tug in his chest he could not ignore. Protocol demanded that he remain perfectly composed, a silent sentinel of tradition. Yet his heart demanded action, a personal expression of grief, respect, and love. He glanced at the royal family, all composed and formal, and then at the citizens outside who watched with sorrow and reverence. He knew that what he felt was private, yet he also understood that the moment called for something more than silence. Slowly, Liam took a step forward. Each footfall echoed in the quiet hall. Whispers began to ripple among the attendees. Guards exchanged quick glances, unsure if Liam had forgotten his training. The royal family turned their heads, curious and slightly surprised. But Liam did not falter. His eyes remained fixed on the casket as he walked forward with a steady but purposeful pace. He felt every heartbeat, every memory, and every tear that the Queen had inspired in his life and in the lives of others. When he reached the casket, he paused. He placed one gloved hand gently on the polished wood. The room seemed to hold its breath. Liam closed his eyes, and in that moment he whispered words only the Queen could have heard. "Thank you for everything," he said softly. "I will never forget your kindness." The hall was silent, and yet the atmosphere shifted. The rigid formality of the ceremony seemed softer, more human. Those who witnessed it felt a quiet awe, sensing that something extraordinary had just occurred. The royal family's faces softened. The ministers exchanged looks of surprise, but there was no anger, only understanding. Liam's act, small as it seemed, carried the weight of love, loyalty, and gratitude. It was a reminder that even in the most formal and disciplined moments, humanity and emotion could shine through. Outside, citizens watching the ceremony felt a ripple of emotion pass through them. A single act of courage and sincerity had reminded everyone that grief, respect, and love were more powerful than any rule. Liam remained by the casket for a long moment, feeling the Queen's presence in every memory. He remembered her laughter, her gentle encouragement, and the way she had always believed in him. He realized that honoring someone was not only about following rules or performing duties, it was about sincerity, care, and connection. Today he had chosen to honor the Queen not as a formality, but as a human being who had touched his life deeply. As he stepped back and rejoined the line of guards, Liam felt a calm strength settle within him. He had broken protocol, yes, but he had also fulfilled a far greater duty, to the Queen herself and to the people who loved her. He understood that rules were important, but true respect came from the heart, and in that moment, the Queen's spirit seemed to smile as if acknowledging the courage it took to show love openly. The ceremony continued, but its atmosphere had changed. The formal motions were still observed, yet every eye in the hall now carried a trace of warmth, a reminder that the Queen had been loved not only as a ruler, but as a person who touched the hearts of everyone she met. Liam knew that this day would be remembered, not just for the ceremony itself, but for the quiet, sincere act of a guard who had followed his heart, and in doing so, had honored the Queen in the most meaningful way possible. Word of the Queen's funeral had spread throughout the kingdom, and people from every village, town, and city gathered to pay their respects. Streets were lined with citizens holding flowers, candles, and portraits of Queen Amelia. Shops remained closed, schools held quiet assemblies, and families stood together in the rain or sunshine, sharing in the collective grief. Yet something extraordinary had begun to unfold. News of Liam, the royal guard, breaking protocol to show his personal farewell to the Queen. Outside the palace gates, a crowd had gathered, their eyes fixed on the live broadcast of the ceremony inside. People watched in silence as Liam approached the casket, placed his hand gently upon it, and whispered his words of love and respect. A hush fell over the audience, and for a moment everyone seemed to hold their breath. Parents squeezed the hands of their children, and elders nodded with understanding. They could see the courage it took to show true emotion in a moment that demanded strict formality. In the streets, whispers began to grow into soft murmurs of admiration. "Did you see that?" one person asked. "The guard, he really cared for the Queen." Children, too young to understand the details of protocol, looked up at their parents and asked questions. Parents explained simply, "Even when rules are strict, it is okay to show love and kindness." Many nodded, feeling a warmth spread through their hearts. Liam's action had reminded them of the Queen's humanity, the way she had loved, cared, and inspired. In homes across the kingdom, televisions, radios, and streaming devices displayed the moment again and again. People who had never met Liam or the Queen felt a deep connection. Letters and messages poured into the palace from citizens who wished to honor both the Queen and the guard. Some wrote of how they had been inspired to show kindness in small ways to their own families, neighbors, and friends. Others shared stories of how Queen Amelia's leadership had touched their lives, and now, Liam's courage had made them feel that their grief could also be expressed openly. Even the palace staff, who had spent years in the service of the Queen, felt moved beyond words. Many had kept their composure throughout the ceremony, performing duties with perfect discipline, Yet watching Liam's simple act reminded them that love and humanity could not be measured by rules alone. It was a quiet lesson in courage, respect, and compassion, one that would be remembered long after the funeral ended. Liam himself remained unaware of the full impact his gesture had caused. After stepping back from the casket and returning to his post, he focused on standing tall, on continuing his duty. But inside he felt a deep peace. He had honored the Queen not just as a ruler, but as someone who had shaped his life, who had believed in him, and who had inspired countless others. Every memory of her, the laughter, the encouragement, the quiet conversations, felt alive in that moment. News reporters and social media commentators spoke of the act of courage. Images of Liam by the casket were shared across towns and villages, and citizens began to reflect on what it truly meant to honor someone. They realized that respect and admiration were not only shown through ceremonies, but also through acts of love, compassion, and honesty. Liam's simple, heartfelt farewell had reminded everyone that emotions were not weaknesses. They were what connected people, bridged distances, and kept memories alive. As the sun set on the day of the funeral, the streets remained filled with people, quietly holding candles and flowers. Families returned home slowly, speaking in hushed tones about the Queen and the guard who had shown them all the power of sincerity. Children held their parents' hands and asked to hear stories about the Queen's kindness. In small towns, in big cities, and in the quiet villages, the lesson spread. Rules were important, but the heart could never be ignored. Back at the palace, Liam looked out of a window toward the distant streets. Though he remained in uniform, standing as a royal guard, he felt a connection to the entire kingdom. His small gesture had created ripples of emotion that reached far beyond the palace walls. He understood now that honoring someone was not only about ceremony, but about courage, love, and the willingness to act from the heart. In that moment, Liam realized that the Queen's legacy lived not only in memories, but in every act of kindness and every tear shed in her name. The days following the Queen's funeral were filled with quiet reflection across the kingdom. Flowers still lined the palace gates, and citizens continued to leave letters and drawings as tributes to Queen Amelia. Schools held lessons about her life, reminding children of her wisdom, kindness, and courage. Stories of her deeds were shared in towns and villages, and in every corner people remembered her not just as a ruler, but as a woman who had touched lives with love and compassion. Among them, Liam remained humble yet deeply moved. Though he had returned to his duties as a royal guard, his heart felt lighter in some ways. The simple act of placing his hand on the Queen's casket had caused a ripple that reached far beyond the palace walls. Letters poured in, thanking him for reminding people that love and respect were more important than strict adherence to rules. Parents shared the story with their children, teaching them that courage was not always about bravery in battle, but about honesty, kindness, and the courage to show feelings when it mattered most. One morning, Liam walked through the palace gardens where Queen Amelia had spent many peaceful hours. The flowers she had tended were blooming beautifully, filling the air with a sweet fragrance. Liam paused near a bench she had favored, placing his hand gently on the wood. He remembered how she had encouraged him to enjoy simple things, to find beauty in everyday life, and to help others whenever possible. He felt a wave of gratitude for having known someone so extraordinary, and he promised silently to carry her teachings forward in every action he took. Liam began to visit parts of the kingdom that had been especially close to the Queen's heart. He spent time in schools telling children stories about her kindness and the lessons she had shared. He helped organize small community events, encouraging citizens to plant flowers, read books, or share acts of kindness with neighbors. Each effort was small, yet every action reminded people of the Queen's warmth. Liam's dedication inspired others to act in ways that honored her memory. In the villages, people spoke of Liam with respect, not just as a royal guard, but as someone who embodied the spirit of the Queen. Farmers remembered the times she had helped them during difficult seasons, and now seeing Liam's visits and actions, they felt that her legacy continued. Children drew pictures of the Queen smiling, with Liam often included beside her in their imagination, representing loyalty, care, and friendship. The simple acts of a guard had transformed the way people experienced grief, turning sadness into hope and admiration. Artists began creating paintings and sketches of the Queen and Liam during the funeral, capturing the moment when he had broken protocol out of respect and love. Poets wrote verses inspired by his courage, and musicians composed soft melodies that told the story of a man who acted from his heart in honor of someone extraordinary. The story spread across the kingdom, and even those who had been far from the palace felt connected to the moment. Liam's tribute had become a bridge between personal emotion and public admiration, reminding everyone that true honor could be shown in simple, heartfelt gestures. One evening, Liam returned to the palace gardens. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the flowers and the fountain. He walked slowly along the familiar paths, remembering Queen Amelia's laughter, her gentle words, and her unwavering kindness. He knew that the nation was inspired by his act, yet for him the most important thing was personal. It was about keeping her memory alive in his heart, and in the hearts of those he could reach. He realized that a single gesture, small yet sincere, could leave a lasting impression that went far beyond any ceremony or tradition. As night fell, the palace was quiet. Liam sat on the bench gazing at the stars, feeling the presence of the Queen in every gentle breeze and the soft rustle of leaves. He understood that her influence would continue to grow, not just through monuments or stories, but through every act of kindness that her memory inspired. He smiled softly, knowing that in this way, the Queen lived on, not only in the palace but in every heart she had touched, and in every person willing to act with love and courage. Liam's tribute had become a story of its own, a story of loyalty, sincerity, and the enduring power of the human heart. And as the kingdom slowly healed from its grief, it did so knowing that the Queen's spirit remained alive, guiding them toward compassion, hope, and understanding. The weeks after the Queen's funeral passed quietly, yet the kingdom remained deeply touched by the events of that day. Citizens continued to honor Queen Amelia, not just through flowers and candles, but through acts of kindness inspired by her life. Schools taught children about her generosity, villages held community gatherings in her memory, and towns shared stories of how she had helped them in times of need. Everywhere, the Queen's spirit seemed alive, guiding the people to care for one another. Liam continued his duties as a royal guard, yet his role had subtly changed. No longer was he just a sentinel of tradition. He had become a symbol of courage, respect, and sincerity. Citizens greeted him with quiet admiration, sharing stories of how his act during the funeral had inspired them to show compassion in their own lives. Elderly neighbors thanked him, children waved excitedly, and even strangers in the streets nodded with respect. Though Liam never sought recognition, he felt a quiet joy knowing that the Queen's values were spreading through the kingdom. Each morning, Liam walked through the palace gardens, remembering Queen Amelia's favorite spots, the fountain where she loved to feed the birds, the stone bench she often rested upon, and the flower beds she tended with care. The gardens now felt like a living memory of her presence. He often paused to place a hand on the bench or smell the flowers, silently thanking the Queen for the lessons she had left behind. These moments were private, yet they strengthened his resolve to honor her legacy in every action he took. Liam also visited schools and community centers, sharing stories of Queen Amelia's kindness and courage. He spoke to children about the importance of helping others, of noticing small needs, and of showing love through thoughtful actions. Teachers and parents praised his efforts, noting that his example had a lasting impact on the young hearts he spoke to. It was a reminder that the Queen's influence extended far beyond the palace, reaching every corner of the kingdom through those who remembered her. Artists, writers, and musicians continued to create works inspired by the Queen and Liam's gesture at her funeral. Paintings depicted the moment with vibrant colors, capturing both sorrow and love. Poets wrote verses about courage, sincerity, and the power of heartfelt tribute. Musicians composed soft melodies that told the story of loyalty and compassion, and these works were shared widely, allowing even those far from the palace to feel connected to the Queen's memory. Liam often saw these works displayed in public squares or community halls, and each one reminded him that true respect was felt in the heart, not just performed in ceremony. One evening, Liam stood on the palace balcony looking out over the city. The streets glowed with lanterns, and in the distance he could see citizens leaving flowers at the palace gates. The kingdom had begun to heal, but more importantly, it had begun to carry forward the lessons of Queen Amelia's life. Compassion, kindness, and sincerity were no longer abstract ideas. They were living, actions practiced by people who had been inspired to follow her example. Liam understood that the Queen's legacy would continue not because of statues or titles, but because of people's hearts. Every act of kindness, every word of encouragement, and every thoughtful gesture carried a part of her spirit. He felt proud to have been part of that, not as a hero, but as someone who simply followed the guidance of his heart. The Queen had taught him that respect and love were more important than rigid rules, and he knew that lesson would continue to shape the kingdom for generations. As night fell, Liam walked through the quiet palace gardens one last time for the evening. The flowers glowed softly in the moonlight, and the gentle breeze seemed to carry whispers of the Queen's laughter. He paused, closing his eyes, and felt a deep sense of peace. The kingdom had not only mourned Queen Amelia, but had learned from her example and from his courage to act from the heart. Her memory lived on in every kind word, every thoughtful deed, and every life she had touched. Liam smiled softly, knowing that true honor was not measured in ceremonies or protocol alone. It was measured in sincerity, courage, and love. And so Queen Amelia's spirit continued to shine, guiding the kingdom toward compassion, unity, and hope. Her life had been a gift, and through her memory, that gift would continue to inspire every heart in the kingdom forever. The story of a royal guard who broke protocol at the Queen's funeral became more than just a tale. It became a lesson, a reminder that love and humanity always have the power to move nations, touch hearts, and leave a legacy that lasts far longer than any crown.